Welcome to the Rage Hard Podcast, where we talk about how to get in touch with your emotions, connect to the universe with psychedelics, and charge really shiny crystals in the light of the full moon.
I'm just fucking with you.
Let's say there's 500 people in the audience. Let's say, how many people here would like to feel that you could authentically be yourself in any given moment? And everybody would raise their hand. Everybody say, yeah, I want that. And I say, okay, how many of you feel that you're actually doing that? And maybe 1 to no hands would go up. And I say, so that's what we're here to talk about.
All right, you beast. Welcome to the Rage Heart Podcast, where I talk to all kinds of interesting people, including therapists, ayahuasca shamans, and maestros, 5-MeO DMT facilitators, that's today, occasionally my pet cats, and also myself. Sometimes I talk to myself. I don't know about you, but I'm fond of talking to myself about all things nervous system healing, psychedelics, and plant medicine, how to unleash the beast inside you, and especially today, how to be yourself. Today, I am talking to Martin Ball from the Entheogenic Evolution Podcast. He is a former 5-MeO DMT facilitator. That's a very powerful psychedelic. I actually haven't done it myself, so I don't know too much about it, but it's extremely powerful, fairly short-lived. And Martin Ball is a former facilitator for that, and he's written a bunch of books. He has a podcast as well, obviously, and a bunch of other things that I'm not going to go into right now because Martin goes into it in the episode itself. We talk about things like ego, how to get past it, the mind, all the stories, all the things we think we have to be, so you can actually be yourself, not who you think you are or who you think you need to be or what you think you are, but who you actually are. Now, this is actually one of my favorite topics to talk about anywhere out of everything. And really the core and the heart of Rage Heart in many ways is there's remembering who and what we are. The phrase that I like is remember who you are, which came from The Lion King, where I burst into tears halfway through. I don't usually cry in movies. It's not typical of me, but this happened. I cried for probably the last third of the movie until the end of the credits. I'll tell the story in this episode, so you'll find out why. But this phrase, there's a lot of juice behind it. And I know it might sound trite or basic or trivial as like, I get it. Like, I know who I am. What are you talking about? But, I would have said that too. And then when I started peeling back these layers, it's the most thrilling, beautiful, magical thing that I believe can happen to anyone. Certainly the most interesting and fascinating and, like I said, beautiful and magical thing that's happened to me and continues to unfold. This realization of what we are, the truth of it, when you let all ideas go. Okay, so that's a big part of this episode. So before I get too philosophical and too deep into this topic on my own, I'm going to move on because Martin and I, like I said, we're going to talk about it quite a bit in this episode in the context of psychedelics and plant medicine and embodiment tools like what I teach in Rage Heart. But before we get to that, just a quick update. I wanted to share another insight from the recent dieta, the plant medicine dieta, the 2-week diet that I did, where there was 5 days of fasting, 4 ayahuasca ceremonies, and lots of time sitting on my own, listening to the mind do what it does, make stories about all kinds of random shit. So the idea or the insight, and this might be just a sort of a spin on last week, but what I'm noticing, as I do this work with myself, as I watch other people, as I do this with Rage Heart as well, is sometimes focusing on the problem, right? Whether it's anxiety or depression or whatever specific set of symptoms we have, because we all have something, most people do. Focusing too much on that, what I'm learning and what I'm seeing is it just creates more of the same. And the reason for this, I think, is that the way the nervous system works is when we see a threat, it's normal for the nervous system to then start to want to get rid of it, to run away from it or to attack it. That's okay when it's a tiger or something that you can actually get away from, hopefully. But when it's inside you and it's something that you're orienting towards yourself as a threat, you can't run away. You can't really get rid of it, not easily, not straight away. It's a process. And so by focusing on the anxiety, the fear, the doubt, the imposter syndrome, the depression, whatever it is, what I'm seeing is then the system can go, oh, that's a threat, which then increases the sympathetic activation in the system, the sense that something's wrong, which then increases the motivation to find and look for threats. And it's like, oh, now I see the anxiety. But this time it seems like it's an even bigger threat because you're already more activated. And so we end up with this negative loop. If we see a threat in ourselves, the symptom that we don't like about ourselves, and then the nervous system activates and gets more stressed. Because it's more stressed, it's then more prone to looking for threats. Then it sees the anxiety or the symptom again, but now it's worse. The threat response goes up, sympathetic activation increases, and we just end up in this negative loop. We just get stuck in this cycle of shit, basically. The solution, what I'm saying is and this is a big part of what I teach people inside Rage Heart, is instead of being sympathetic in this fight or flight mode, we've got to learn how to come out of that and actually start to focus on the space, the relaxation, right? The parts of ourselves that are not maybe in pain. Maybe they don't feel good, but they might feel less bad than the really bad part. And by starting to tune into some of the things that are okay, physically, mentally, emotionally, the system can then start to relax out of this sympathetic state, start to come more into a parasympathetic rest and digest. And that's where all the healing happens. So if there is anxiety, there is depression, there is physical symptoms that we really want to get rid of, focusing on it's not the answer. The answer is to start to cultivate a more parasympathetic mode in the nervous system, and then the body and the nervous system will take care of itself. As for how to do this, you're going to learn this listening to this podcast. You can get onto the Daily Growl. That's my daily email that I send out at rageheart.co. And there's, of course, the Rage Heart Academy as well. But you don't have to pay for anything if you don't want to. You can get a lot of what I'm talking about by listening to this podcast today, by listening to the other podcasts, getting the free emails. And part of it's just an attitude thing, knowing where to look and where not to look, okay? So one last thing, if you enjoy this podcast and believe in what I'm talking about on here and what the guests are talking about, I certainly do. I love this stuff. I'm doing this because I believe in this more than just about anything. And I'm doing everything I can to get the word out about this because most people have no idea about these ideas yet. These tools for these ways of working with the nervous system. So if you want to help me get the word out, if you believe in this stuff too, and you want to be part of it, I'd love it if you could share this podcast, this episode, one of the other episodes, whatever it is, with your friends, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you want to use. Tinder and Bumble is fine too. I don't know how that's going to go down though. And if you can, I'd love a review. It really helps. Any review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. Or if that's too hard, just grab a billboard on Times Square. I won't mind. It all makes a difference, even that billboard. So I've got one this week from Sonam. He's a member. He's on the Daily Growl, the email newsletter at rageheart.co. He's part of the Rage Heart Academy, getting the training. And here's what he says. I feel much more present and aware. By aware, I mean more intimately connected to my body. I'm more sensitive to feelings and physically embodied emotions, and I am less overwhelmed because of it. Life is still busy, still stressful, still very tension-inducing, but I find myself recognizing when I'm tense more often, which gives me more agency to tend to my body's needs. And I wanted to read that one out because there's so much good shit in there, right? As we become more aware, we become less overwhelmed. We're feeling more, and that can be challenging. But we also become better equipped to actually take care of our body and mind and what we actually need rather than what we think we need. Like I said, it's a feeling. You got to feel it. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's get into the interview with Martin Ball. All right, it's John Wood here, the founder of Rage Heart with the Unleash the Beast podcast. I'm here with Martin Ball, I'd say the host or the founder or the guy who runs Entheogenic Evolution. That's the podcast. And I went on his show, I think it was a week ago. We recorded an interview a week ago. He was referred by a lady named Kat, who's also been on the Unleash the Beast podcast. And I thought it'd be fun to get him on just to talk about his story because he has a lot of experience with psychedelics and plant medicine, as well as far as I understand it, meditation and some of non-duality and how all these tools can start to play together. And something called, I watched a video with him talking about 5-MeO DMT mushrooms, which we can get into that. And he's doing some kind of symmetrical something. I don't really understand what it is or what it's about, but I want to find out more about that today as well, because I think it's going to go all this stuff about embodiment, learning to feel, learning to be here. It sounds like he's doing very much the same thing, but perhaps in a slightly different way. So I'm pretty pumped. Martin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Good to be here today, John.
Good to have you, man. It's funny because, like, just to see you, like, sitting right here, because I just watched, like, 2 hours ago this psilomethoxin mushroom experiment, so the 5-MeO DMT mushrooms, and you were literally sitting in exactly the same place doing, wasn't really yoga, but doing your movement stuff behind you. So part of me is like, did you take mushrooms today? Because that'd make for a pretty cool podcast.
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny that I get similar comments a lot because, yeah, this is my home, this is my office, this is where I do what I do, is right here, and this is where I've been living for the past year and a half. So any video with me is going to be from exactly this location. And I also do a lot of video consultation calls with clients, and they often say, "Yeah, I was watching your video, and you're sitting in the same place." And some, it kind of all bleeds together between the videos of me and then actually talking to me. So I get it. I'm kind of just a one location person.
And you get some musical instruments, I see. You got a guitar, a couple guitars, right? You got the drum, a whole bunch of stuff going on there.
Yeah. I've got my instruments behind me. I'm not working on any music currently, but I like to leave my instruments out. Early on when I was developing as a musician, I used to play like all the time, like every day, especially playing guitar. I'd play guitar like at least an hour every day. Most days now, my instruments just sit around till I carve out time to work on a new album or something, and then I break out all my instruments. And actually, over this last year, I've got this 12-string guitar back here, and I hadn't really played my 12-string in a couple years. And I like to keep my guitars in different tunings. So I have my 6-string guitar, and I keep that in a tuning that I kind of invented when I was like 19 years old. So it's just my own personal tuning. And then the 12-string guitar, I play that in dadgad mostly.
Dadgad.
And I haven't played it for a couple years.
Thinking like some kind of clothing.
Yeah. So rather than
dadgad.
What is it? E-B.
Drop D.
G-D-A-E. Yeah, so it's D-A-D-G-A-D, dadgad. And it's been a few years since I played it. And so back in the spring of last year, I kind of picked up the 12-string, changed the strings on it, which it really needed, and then kind of had to relearn playing in dadgad, and then created and recorded a bunch of songs in that tuning. But since doing that album, it's called 12 Strings, I have not played it. So yeah, they sit there, and then I think about them, and then every once in a while, I'm kind of a project person. I like to, if I'm working on a book, I'm working on a book. If I'm working on art, I'm working on art. And then if I'm working on an album, I'm working on an album. And so that's kind of how I block out my time and stay productive. So right now they're just sitting there, but I just yesterday I started working on my 12th audiobook. And as soon as I'm done recording all of the reading of the audiobook, then I will go and create a new album of music that will serve as the soundtrack for the audiobook. So that's kind of where I am in the project phase for 2023 at the moment.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. I think I mentioned this last time. I've only got an acoustic guitar here with me, but I was, playing guitar as a kid, teenager as well. I got to put it up on the wall. I just haven't done it yet. But somewhere where it's like, I can just pick it up, start playing. Whereas right now it's down in probably my bedroom at the moment. And I'll pick it up every now and then, but I'm not really, I don't have any schedule. I'm not making anything specifically. It's just if I think about it at the time, I'll pick it up. Otherwise it doesn't get played.
Yeah. Mine just sit there till I'm working on an album.
Fantastic. So you're a musician, you have a Ph.D, you've written some books, you got an audio book in the works, sound like you do art. If I was to say, who is Martin Ball and what does he do, or how would you How would you introduce yourself to a new person or a new audience who's come to find out how to unleash the beast?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll give you kind of the cheeky answer. So the cheeky answer is I am a localized embodiment of the universal being and consciousness that is associated with the personality known as Martin Ball, that is also associated with this particular physical form, which you see here before you. And that particular character of Martin Ball is a 50-year-old male, lives in Ashland, Oregon. And I'm kind of a sort of a self-described psychedelic Renaissance man in again, kind of a cheeky way, in the sense that, I'm an author, I'm a musician, I'm an artist, I am an integration coach, I'm a non-dual teacher and guide, I'm a podcast host, I'm an event organizer. Formerly, I was a 5-MeO DMT facilitator for 7 years as well. Before that, I was a facilitator of Salvia Divinorum. So I do a bunch of different things. But my basic identity is that I am a self-described radical non-dualist, meaning that I look at everything as a manifestation as one universal being and consciousness, and we are all direct expressions of that. And I'm very clear on the facts, so that's why I kind of give that cheeky description of myself. But basically, just to put it more simply, I'm an independent person. I'm not associated with any groups or medical boards or universities in the psychedelic movement. That I'm pretty much a self-produced in all of the areas that I've described above, and I've kind of been forging my own pathway through all of this, and have been sort of public in the psychedelic sphere since 2006. That was the year that this book of mine, Mushroom Wisdom, got published. Some people think it's my first book. It's actually my fifth book that I wrote 4 novels before that. And then I wrote this book, Mushroom Wisdom, that came out in 2006. And then in 2007, I wrote a book about Salvia Divinorum called Sage Spirit. And then in 2008 and 2009, I underwent a radical process of self-transformation, awakening, and energetic recalibration, primarily through the vehicle of 5-MeO DMT, and also with ayahuasca, mushrooms, Salvia Divinorum. But the main driver of that was definitely the 5-MeO DMT. So since about 2008, I've kind of best been known for my work around 5-MeO DMT. I was the person who nicknamed it the God molecule, which is now kind of widely referred to around the world as this molecule is the God molecule. And I'm the one who came up with that based on my own experiences. And I've written a number of books about it. Probably the most popular and significant is my 2017 book. This one here, I call it the Blue Book, is Entheogenic Liberation, Unraveling the Enigma of Non-Duality with 5-MeO DMT Energetic Therapy. And I think it's safe to say it's widely regarded as the most comprehensive book that's been written about 5-MeO DMT. And it's all through my own particular lens that I put on it. That, you mentioned I have my Ph.D. that's in religious studies. I earned that from the University of California, Santa Barbara, in comparative mysticism, ritual in the body, Native American religious traditions. So I have an academic background in the study of religion. I also am self-described as not religious and not spiritual. I'm not interested in fluffy woo-woo bullshit. It really rubs me the wrong way. I'm interested in clarity. I'm interested in presence. I'm interested in authenticity. And I do not like fluff. I do not like mystification. I do not like over-reliance on ritual and prayer and the rest of that stuff, because as a radical non-dualist, my rejoinder to all of that is, who are you praying to? Who are you worshiping? Where are you trying to get to? Because you already are that. And whatever it is that you're praying to, that's you. So, I'm kind of uncompromising in that regard. And I've written a number of books about it. And I started my podcast, The Entheogenic Evolution, back in 2008. And I could be wrong, but I do think that at this point, I might be the longest running consistent podcast about psychedelics and entheogens on the planet, because I don't know anybody else who's been doing it for 15 years consistently and is still going. So.
Fascinating. So, there's so many different directions we could go with this, but I think for people coming in, so maybe to give you some context with this Unleash the Beast title, the whole idea behind it is not, I'm trying to put words to something which, like this sense of embodiment, which I imagine you understand, the sense of like landing of being in the body, not in the mind, which to me has led to all kinds of different, emotional, energetic releases, sometimes growling, all kinds of things that can be very animalistic and beastly in a way. And so there's something very profound and healing and powerful when I think we as humans get in touch with that aspect of ourselves and get out of the head, this, thinking mind that's always going, and start to feel. It's more animalistic. And so that's the whole idea behind Unleash the Beast. It's not necessarily about making money or succeeding in anything in particular. It's just about being who we are, which is very similar to what you're talking about with the non-duality, that you are already yourself. It's just getting all that shit out of the way. So to me, it makes sense. I imagine to you it makes sense too. But to someone who's hasn't had 5-MeO or hasn't had one of these breakthrough experiences with psychedelics, I imagine sometimes it's like, I've had this trouble too, trying to explain some of these things to people of what it's actually like can be very difficult because there's no frame of reference. So, it's nice to say, oh, it's all well and good and we're all expressions of the universal consciousness. But how would you put that into words that someone who's not maybe there yet or hasn't had that experience yet, that they might be able to understand? Like, one place to start would be like, what does that mean for your day-to-day reality in practical terms?
Well, in practical terms, what it really comes down to is that, people come up with all kinds of ideas like, well, what is my purpose? What is my mission? Who should I be? What am I supposed to do? And these are all questions of the ego, right? Through our self-awareness, we know that we exist, we know that we're here, and we ask all these questions like, is somebody in charge? What's going on here? What are the rules? How do I play right? And all of those are questions of the ego, and then the ego throws out answers to those and then says, okay, I'm going to conform to those or not conform to those answers. But my basic answer to it is, look, your job is to be yourself. And the problem is that it's not really possible for people to fully authentically be themselves if they do not know who and what they are. So this process of learning how to authentically be yourself is involved in the process of also discovering the authentic nature of the self. And I know that can sound new agey and wishy-washy, and lots of people use those terms. But I have a very specific meaning behind that. And that is that, just to put it into very simple language, as I like to tell people, like, for example, in my 2009 book, Being Human, which is the first book that I wrote after going through this own transformation within myself. So at the very end of the book, I have these entheogenic affirmations. And they're supposed to be a little bit cheeky. And so the first one says, guess what? You are God. Now get over it. So that kind of encapsulates this idea of non-duality when I use the word God, what I'm referring to is that there is one universal consciousness and being. And that is the true nature of all identity. So if I strip away my Martinness, if I strip away my humanness, if I strip away all of my social, political, family, cultural, ethnic identities, if I strip all of that away, we get down to what's at the core of it. What people can discover about themselves is like, oh shit, I'm it. I am this universal consciousness and universal being that is not attached to any one particular form. And because every person can experience that for him or herself, that means that we all have the same ultimate identity. We are all the universal consciousness and being that are performing as these different characters through these different vehicles, which is a term that I like to use to refer to the body. So the body is the vehicle. The character is the personality, the persona, the ego that says, hi, I'm Martin. Hi, I'm John. Martin thinks these things, acts these ways. John acts these ways, has these thoughts, has these personal experiences. But when we go beyond that, you and I both can experience, I am the universal consciousness. I am the universal being. And that universal being is not transcendent of reality. It actually is reality itself. So that this awareness, in a sense, is infused within everything that exists, that everything that we experience is just this one universal being that is interacting with itself through these different characters and these different guises of subject and object, me and not me. So that's why, I have this little entheogenic affirmation. Guess what? You are God. Now get over it. And that's also the important part, because, when people go through these experiences, sometimes they're like, oh yeah, I am God. I am the chosen one. I am the authority. I am the one that needs to be worshiped and bowed down to. And that's why I say, now get over it, because it's true for everybody. Everyone is that. No one is special in that sense. We're all very, very special, but also no one is special. And another one that I have here is, you are God's altered state. So when this universal consciousness forgets, oh yeah, I'm the universal consciousness, it thinks, oh, I'm Martin. So when God is tripping really hard, God thinks it's Martin. And then when Martin is tripping really hard, he realizes, oh, I'm the universal consciousness. And another one, just God doesn't take you seriously, so why should you? And that's another thing with the ego, where we take everything so seriously. We take everything so personally. We invest so much meaning into all the events of our lives and all of our interpretations, there's a little joke that I like to use with this, where, I do a lot of bird photography. It's one of my personal passions. And I like to photograph lots of raptors, eagles, hawks, things like that. And, and this is kind of endemic in the spiritual world, where people say, oh, I saw an eagle and it meant that I was on the right path because it gave me a blessing or something like that. That, we impose all of this meaning onto everything that happens all the time. And every last little bit of that is invented by the ego. It's not real. It's just the imposition of meaning onto the experience of reality. So my joke is, people ask me like, oh, wow, you saw an eagle. What did that mean? And my answer is, it means I was at the right place at the right time to photograph an eagle. Doesn't mean anything more than that. And so it's kind of getting into this idea of stop taking things so seriously. Stop imposing so much meaning, because basically through the ego, we are addicted to the meaning-making function of the ego. And the only thing that makes meaning is the ego. It's the self-awareness that is able to ask questions, propose answers, and then attach themselves to those. So anyway, to get back to your question, this process of learning how to really authentically be yourself in your body, which is also another place where I make a distinction that a lot of quote-unquote meditation traditions propose a very disembodied and disconnected view of liberation, that I'm going to float off into the ethers, I'm going to leave my body behind, I'm going to ascend through these different realms, and then I'm going to live in this pure spiritual realm, and I'm just going to sit in meditation the rest of my life. And for me, that's just a total cop-out. That's just spiritual bypassing to the extreme degree. So for me, the question is, how do I land that in my body, in my being? And that's where I introduce this idea of this energetic reformatting that takes place. So sorry, this is kind of a long answer, but I'm getting to it. So the ego I like to identify is just patterns of energetic expression, embodiment, and thought and belief with which we identify through a self-aware capacity. Meaning that everything that happens with the ego is just a pattern. It's a patterned form of expression. So, for example, right now, anybody who is familiar with me or has listened to me, they could identify, oh yeah, that's Martin speaking. I can hear his voice. I know that that's him. These are the words that he likes to use. This is the way that he likes to express himself. It's all just patterned stuff. And I identify with that and say, oh yeah, that's me. But if I were to talk to you in a funny voice like that, you'd say, oh, well, maybe that's not Martin. Maybe that he's just trying to be a leprechaun or some crazy shit like that. And if I went around like that all the time, people would say, dude, why are you being this bizarre leprechaun? And I could say, oh, it's performance art. But if I started to identify with that, then that could become my new identity. So what we get a lot of times is people swap one set of patterns for another as they shift and change their identity, as they're looking for that authentic self. But the only way to really get to the authentic self is to transcend beyond all of these limited energetic patterns of expression so that we can go into a state of infinite awareness and infinite energetic expansion to learn who and what we truly are. And then it's a matter of, how do I bring that back into my embodied existence in a way that actually helps free me from the habitual patterning of the ego and the limiting identification with it. And so by encountering ourselves at the deepest level, that's where we have the greatest potential to actually transform who and what we are into a more authentically embodied mode of being, where we're not bound by the ego. So the ego at that point is no longer a prison. I like to liken it more to a set of clothing that we can take on and off as needed, according to whatever our energetic environment or interaction might be. And so it's a long answer with a lot of different ideas, but that's basically what you're seeing in that silomethoxin video.
Right. I'm going to play devil's advocate just because, I think I know what you're talking about, because I've worked a lot with psychedelics and had some of these experiences. But even on people who've had, worked with psychedelics have often, a lot of them haven't, I don't know, not everyone who seems to, take psychedelics has these types of experiences. So part of me wants to, ask on behalf of those people, what's the point? Why? Because that's when I would try to explain some of these experiences to other people, I could see their eyes would kind of glaze over, they didn't get it. It's just what? Huh? It all sounds great, with the nice words, universal consciousness and awareness and authenticity. And it sounds great. It's nice words. But I imagine there's someone out there that's yeah, but so what? I know there's something there, but how would you describe, if someone's saying that, what's the point of this? Why bother? Why not just live your life?
Yeah. Well, it's honestly a very good question. And so I always think that it's best to kind of work through specific examples rather than speaking in generalities when addressing a question like this. So here's where I use myself as an example, because I have two very distinct parts of my life that I can identify. One, where I was not being authentically myself, and then when I learned how to authentically be myself, and then what changed for me through that. So the ego of Martin Ball, the identity of this person. I grew up in a secular, non-religious, non-spiritual household, but even as a young child was very interested in the question of, what is the true nature of reality? And there was even at one point when I was a small child and I got down and just following the prompts that I saw on TV, when kids pray, they kneel down on their bed and they put their hands in front of them and they're like, please God, blah, 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 or whatever. So anyway, I tried doing that once and I got down on my bed and I put my hands in front of myself and I said, God, if you exist, I really want to know, but I just want you to know that I'm not just going to believe in you because I don't buy it. And so I'm going to need some proof. So that was one of my defining characteristics as a person, is that I was very interested in this question of what is real? What is the nature of reality? And that's kind of what spurred me on to study philosophy and then go into religious studies and investigating altered states of consciousness and questions of the nature of reality. But anyway, I like everybody else, as growing up, small children start to develop their sense of self, and they start to distinguish between what they think is themselves and what is not themselves. This is a primary function of the ego, that it makes a distinction between me and not me, self and not self, subject and object. So that's what we call duality, right? Existing in a realm of duality where there's me and then there's everything that is not me. And like everybody else, you take on certain patterns and certain modes of expression that may or may not really be authentic for you. So one of the patterns that I took on, and one of the identities that I formed for myself, is that coming from a secular household, when I first learned about Buddhism, I was very astounded because this was not talking about believing in Jesus or reading the Bible or heaven or hell, but it was like, sit down, shut up, and pay attention. I liked that. I said, oh, okay, well, maybe I could be a Buddhist. So I was practicing as a Buddhist for a number of years and following meditation and also following compassion and, all of those good things that Buddhism does. And I used Buddhism to kind of create the notion that, I'm a nice guy, I'm a compassionate guy, and I'm not going to make waves, I'm not going to make disturbances. And also, my own parents had gone through a very ugly divorce when I was 9 years old, and they were screaming and yelling and fighting with each other. And so I'd kind of developed this idea like, okay, well, I'm going to be a spiritual person, and I'm not going to get into arguments. I'm not going to make waves. I'm not going to raise my voice. I'm not going to do anything to make other people upset. Now, through those energetic patterns that I was developing within myself, what that meant was that I needed to actually shut myself down on various levels. Because then later in life, I ended up getting married and actually was very unhappy within that relationship. And whenever I would try and discuss my unhappiness with my wife at that time, she would have a big emotional reaction and really shut down. And so what I learned was suck it up, be nice, and use your Buddhism to overcome your attachment to wanting to have a fulfilling sexual and romantic relationship, that I'm just attached to those desires. And so I've got to shut those down, and I've just got to be a nice Buddhist and be a nice guy. And the result is I was fucking miserable. I was totally fucking miserable, and I was not authentically expressing myself, that I was holding all of it inside. And it was all done through this idea of I'm being a good Buddhist, I'm being compassionate, by not expressing or embodying any of these energies that I'm actually feeling. And then for me, the biggest change that came about was when, prompted by events, which I won't get into it because there's just way too many details of the story, but it was at Burning Man in 2007, and I'm tripping on mushrooms out in the middle of the playa all by myself, just sitting there contemplating what I'm supposed to do. And this woman comes up, and we have a brief conversation, and she tells me, look, listen to your heart and follow your heart. And even though it may be hard, 10 years from now, you'll know that you made the right choice. So at that point, after I went home from Burning Man, I told my wife I was leaving, and that was just transformative for me, because at that point I stopped holding it in, and I started allowing myself to really experience what is really in my heart. What do I really feel? And even though, yes, I am concerned about being compassionate and respectful and sensitive to other people's needs, wants, and desires, but I was using all of that as an excuse just to hold myself back and to not really authentically be myself. And it was shortly after that I ended up moving up here to Ashland, Oregon, moving out of Santa Barbara area in Southern California. And within a month, I was invited to experience 5-MeO DMT. And at that event, I was introduced to this molecule, which within seconds, I experienced myself as dying. So I inhale this molecule, and within seconds, it's like, oh shit, I've really done it now. Like, this is it. I'm dying. And not only am I dying, but I'm merging with this infinite consciousness. And not only that, I'm totally cool with it. Like, this is the best thing ever. And my ego, the persona of Martin, thought he was probably never going to come back from that, but I allowed it to take place, and it was the most beautiful experience of my life. And so I had studied non-duality intellectually. I had studied it, as a meditator. I had studied it as a person with a Ph.D. in religious studies and comparative mysticism. But this, I would say, was my first actual experience of it. And at that point, I realized everything that I'd ever thought about this experience was merely that, a thought that my ego had that was boxed into various concepts and words and related to my own sense of identity, my own sense of subject-object separation. And this event completely transcended all thought, transcended all language, transcended all subject-object duality, and went into a place of non-duality. And from that point, then I started undergoing this radical process of energetic reformatting. And through that, again, there's a lot of details. There's a lot of points to it. For anybody who's listening or watching, that's this book, Being Infinite, an Entheogenic Odyssey into the Limitless Eternal, a memoir from ayahuasca to Zen. This is the book that I wrote about my journey and my process because so many people asked me about it. It's like, shit, I should just write a book so I can just give them the book and don't have to tell all the details. So that's this one here. What year did I publish that one? 2014. So I learned how to be myself, and it wasn't what I had thought, and really gave myself permission to, okay, this universal consciousness and being, it is a being of energy. The energy itself is pure unconditional love. Pure unconditional love means, guess what? Anything goes because there are no conditions, meaning that it's up to you to be yourself and also take responsibility for yourself. You know, you can be an asshole if you want, but then you have to take responsibility for that. You have to come with the consequences of being an asshole. You can be an overly compassionate, self-negating person if you want, but then you have to take responsibility for that, and you get the consequences of that you are shut down. So finding that balance of how do I just be myself, be authentically myself, and also invite that from others, so that I've found this freedom within myself and want to encourage and invite that freedom within others. We're kind of giving up any sense of control, either of myself or of others or of outcomes, and being present with reality as it is, without projections, without attachments, and just coming from a place of embodied centeredness and clarity. And it's fucking liberating. It does not solve all of your problems. It does not fix anything for you other than give you that sense of, I am truly being myself, and I have full permission to embody myself in any given moment. So I'm not holding back anymore. I'm not trying to be anything for anyone according to anyone's standards other than that own resonance that I have within my heart of, am I being true to myself? And that is the highest value that I think anybody could live for. So that's the point. And it also removes the bullshit. It removes the delusions. It removes the projections and attachments. So you just live from a place of clarity, which is the greatest gift you could ever possibly give yourself. So that's why I say that, look, if you really want to do yourself a favor, learn who you are and then learn how to be yourself. That's really all you need to do. You don't need to be a master of ethics. You don't need to be a master of meditation. You can be if you want. But the job of being yourself is your job and your responsibility. And you have the power to do it, or you can live in the illusions. You can live in the lies. You can live in the games of the ego and all the value and meaning that the egos invest in all of that. And, you know, I'd rather live an authentic life than a life invested into the games of the ego and the illusions that it projects onto reality, because it's just not all that fun. So that's the point.
I fucking love it, man. Like, I mean, this is what Rage Heart, this is, you know, Rage Heart, Unleash the Beast. Like, part of what I say when I'm starting a rage, and I call them rages, not meditations and not exercises, rages. Part of it's remember who you are. Because I had this, I mean, I've had a bunch of things happen during, you know, it's always been ceremonies for me. It's, you know, I've meditated a lot, but it's usually when these things happen for me, it's during, say, ayahuasca or mushrooms or LSD. I was in Thailand at the time, and I went to see The Lion King with my girlfriend at the time. And you've seen The Lion King, right? If you want to learn more about Rage Heart and how to use these ideas, these tools, these techniques to unleash the beast inside you, to start to get all the ideas and all the programs and all the bullshit from the past out of the way so you can just be yourself, right? So you can remember who you are, as I'm about to explain in the story about Simba and The Lion King and Thailand about 2 weeks before an ayahuasca ceremony. If you want to do that for yourself, of course, plant medicine has been part of my journey. That doesn't mean it has to be part of yours. But a crucial piece for me was the tools I teach, what we talk about in this podcast. But if you want to learn more, the best place to begin is to go to rageheart.co. That's like Braveheart, but rageheart.co. And sign up for what I call the Daily Growl, which is a daily email newsletter where I go into more detail about how to work with the nervous system, how to clear out old survival stress, all the fuzzy stuff from the past, how to get rid of all that that's weighing you down, so that authenticity that Martin and I are talking about can start to shine through naturally. It's not something you have to do or make happen. We just have to get the bullshit out of the way. So if you want to do that and you want to learn more about how to do that with RageHeart, go to rageheart.co, like I said, sign up for the Daily Growl, and get ready to receive some interesting and sometimes mildly offensive emails. And you've seen The Lion King, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Both versions.
So
Cartoon
Simba goes
and the live action.
The new one. Yeah, so this was the new one, the live action, I think. And it gets to that part where Simba runs away from his family, and then he's in the jungle with Timon and Pumbaa, and he's forgotten who he is. He thinks he's basically like Timon and Pumbaa, like a herbivore, eating bugs all the time. The Nala comes along, the girl lion that he ends up falling in love with later, but she comes along to try and take him back. He doesn't want to go. Eventually the monkey comes and sort of gets Simba to chase the monkey all the way down to some water. And Simba looks in the water and sees his dad, and he looks up. His dad's in the clouds, and his dad says, "Remember who you are." And
yeah,
as soon as that happened, this is in the cinema, I burst into tears, and I was sobbing for the rest of the movie until the end of the credits. I'd never, just at that phrase, "Remember who you are." And then I took that in with me 2 or 3 weeks later into an ayahuasca ceremony. Just I can't even put it into words, as you know. The craziest shit happened. And all related to this, remembering, tapping into that sense of being, connecting with the sense of we're all one. It sounds so cheesy, but it's a very real thing that we can tap into. And so, I mean, from I'm just really just trying to, I guess, reinforce or echo back what you're saying. Is it's incredible. Every time I'm not in that all the time, but when it comes through, it's the most amazing thing. The most amazing feeling, the most amazing whatever it is. But it's very difficult to actually explain to someone what you can talk about it conceptually, but then we're back at the level of ideas again. Oh, it's this, it's that, it's this or that.
Yeah.
But so much of it, or all of it, is when all of that falls away. It's you can't put a non-verbal experience into a word because it's no longer a non-verbal experience. Anyway. I just love it. I'm all about this stuff. And that's what RageHeart is all about, is giving people tools, not spiritual tools. They don't have to meditate, but ways to actually figure this stuff out that's more connected with the nervous system and learning how to feel what is that authentic self. Because I tell people, it's not something, you can't think about it. It's not something you decide for yourself. You are just who you are. And it's just learning how to feel for that, getting to know it, and then giving it space and room to just do what it wants to do.
Yeah. And just to kind of echo off of what you're saying there, that, it's been a while since I've given a talk in front of a large audience of people, but I used to do that a lot. And that was one of the things that I would kind of start my talks off with, is I would say, okay, so let's say there's 500 people in the audience. Let's say, how many people here would like to feel that you could authentically be yourself in any given moment? And everybody would raise their hand. Everybody would say, yeah, I want that. And I say, okay, how many of you feel that you're actually doing that? And maybe 1 to no hands would go up. And it's like, so that's what we're here to talk about. That everybody wants this, yet no one feels that they has it. And they don't know how to get it. They don't know how to get there. And that's the fundamental problem. That's what we're looking to overcome, is the limitations of the ego, that you are the one holding yourself back. And I like that you use this example of the Lion King, because even there we can see, so the way that I would characterize it is that human consciousness development has been stunted and held at a phase that is not really the ultimate unfolding of our consciousness and of our being. So here Simba serves as a good example. So Scar, who is greedy for power. Scar wants power, right? That's, Simba's uncle. He's greedy for power, which is his ego. The ego wants power, wants control. So he manipulates a situation that kills, what's Simba's dad's name?
Mufasa.
Mufasa, yeah, Mufasa. So Mufasa dies, And then Scar comes over to the still developing consciousness of little Simba and says, "Oh, Simba, this is your fault. You need to run away." So this is what happens to children, is that children observe sort of the wounded, projecting, grasping egos of adults and take on what those adults tell them and how they inform them. This is how you're supposed to be. So then Simba develops a self-image of himself of, I've been very bad, and I've been so bad, I have to completely suppress all of this, run away, and then lose myself with Timon and Pumbaa, right? So then he develops a new identity that's just, oh, I'm carefree, I'm happy, Hakuna Matata, all that good shit. And so he is now taken on a traumatic wound. He has used that to inform his identity, and then he goes about avoiding it. So this is what we do as human beings, is we take on these patterns that are injected into us by the adults that surround us as children, and then we form an identity, and then we either play into that identity, we're going to be what mom and dad or society wants us to be, or we play against it and say, well, I'm going to be a rebel, or I'm going to suppress that, or I'm going to dissociate from that. So there's all different ways that we react to it. But then we develop our adult persona and ego, and then we get locked into, oh, this is who I am. And so then even there, Simba realizes, okay, whoa, I have to remember who I am. But notice that in the context of the story, it is, oh, I am the king, so I have these responsibilities, and I have to go back, and I have to overthrow Scar, and I have to get rid of all the hyenas, and, Hakuna Matata, circle of life, all that shit. And so this is a reflection of a more mature adult ego that he develops. And this is where I want to say, so this is where a lot of people have developed at. It's like, okay, well, what is my responsibility as a husband, as a father, as a person employed in this business? I'm going to maintain those responsibilities. I'm going to take care of my childhood traumas and my bullshit. And I'm going to do a good job of being the king or whatever it is that I am. And so that's kind of where we've plateaued in terms of egoic development. And so what I see is our natural birthright and sort of the next stage of human evolution is, okay, now let's all go beyond that. Let's get Simba to remember who he really is. He is not just the king. He actually is the universal consciousness performing as the king, performing as Simba, performing as the wounded child. He is all of these things. And so what we like to refer to as a mature, well-integrated, high-functioning adult is actually stuck still at a particular egoic level. And so what in my book, Being Human, I think that's where I first kind of played with this language of saying, look, human beings are basically God toddlers. We're all running around with this self-awareness, which is really amazing, and we've got these egos, but we're basically God toddlers, that we are not fully taking responsibility for ourselves because we're going around like, oh God, will you do this for me? And spirits, will you do this for me? And ancestors, will you do this for me? Or President Trump, will you do this for me? Or QAnon, will you do this for me? Or whoever the fuck we're putting our power and authority onto, rather than looking at, oh, no one can actually do anything for me at that level because I am it. I need to take responsibility for myself. And at that point, I think that we would just transcend beyond all religions, all political ideologies, all of these, what I call meta egos. So we have the personal ego, which is me, Martin. And then the meta ego can be, oh, I'm a member of the quote unquote psychedelic community. So that's part of my meta ego. I actually don't feel like I'm part of the psychedelic community. So I just made that one up. Or I could say, oh, I'm a musician and I play these styles of music. So I'm part of this group of musicians. But even there, I actually refer to my music as shape-shifting music because I don't adhere to any particular style or genre. But anyway, we develop these meta egos to say, I'm part of this group, and this group has this identity and has these values and these purposes and has this authority and this power. And so I see all of this as just a relative conventional construct of egoic patterns of identity and awareness. And I'd like to see human beings transcend all of that. And going back to this idea that, yeah, we literally are all one. The problem is that a lot of people who say that and think that they've got to do something to make us all one. It's like, you can't do anything to make us all one because we already are. So it's about remembering that and embodying that. That is, it's nothing that we can achieve. We can't achieve oneness because everything is one. Everything already is one. That's just the way things are. But we haven't lived that way. And we have had certain religions and certain philosophies and certain political systems that have tried to augment our appreciation of that reality, but it usually comes from a contrived egoic place, and therefore it's not the real deal. It's still just a construct. So it's really the question of how do we get beyond the constructs? And this is where entheogens are invaluable. But even there, I do like to say that 99.99% of all psychedelic experiences are dualistic in nature. Only a very tiny fraction of them are non-dualistic in nature, where you actually transcend beyond the subject-object divide. And that's why 5-MeO-DMT is uniquely unique in that it is the only entheogen that can reliably give us access to those non-dual states of awareness, where we have this ego death experience where we completely transcend our sense of separation and subject, object, space, time, here, there, me, not me, and go into this state of unity and then learn who we are from that state. Whereas most psychedelic experiences are still dualistic in nature of, oh, look, I'm seeing these things. I'm thinking these thoughts. These experiences are happening to me, right? So there's still that divide between subject and object. And that's just because the ego as an energetic construct and collection of energetic patterns is incredibly resilient, as it should be, that it needs to be resilient in order to maintain itself. So it takes a lot of energy to actually break that apart. So mostly what we get from psychedelic experiences, we have a disruption of the egoic identity, and we have a decoupling from some of the patterns of the egoic identity, but we don't have a full transcendence of them. And that's where 5-MeO-DMT is just very unique, that it's powerful enough to actually overcome the resilience of the ego so that we can escape kind of the event horizon of the black hole of the ego that looks to suck everything into its orbit and create meaning from that perspective. That's kind of a mouthful.
So what about like playing the devil's advocate again? I imagine someone might think, oh, that sounds cool. You have a nice experience. You go and do a 5-MeO ceremony, and that's great. What happens the next day, though? How much of that experience stays with you, and how much sort of dissolves? How much is reliance on the 5-MeO and how much becomes integrated and embodied?
Yeah, well, that's kind of the question with all psychedelic experiences. And here, of course, this is a place where I always like to say, look, results vary because it depends on the person. It depends on how they're approaching it, what they're looking to get out of it, and how they are choosing to work with it as a process. And, that's why my book, Entheogenic Liberation, that I use this kind of created this neologism, this idea of unraveling the enigma of non-duality with 5-MeO-DMT energetic therapy. So it's not therapy in a conventional sense, but I'm using the word therapy rather than spiritual practice, because it's not a practice, but it's this idea of, look, through my ego has created a lot of self-limitations within me where I've identified I want to be like this, I don't want to be like that. I allow myself to express these thoughts, these other ones I keep secret. I let myself say these things, these other things I won't say. So we create all these limitations for ourselves. And then we inhabit them. And what happens is we get a backlog of energy within the body that has not been expressed because we've been too busy playing the bullshit game. And so this idea of energetic therapy is that all these energies, these emotions, these thoughts, they're all stored within the body. And so if we can use these as tools to help unlock, and this is where we're getting into the growling, the moving around, the releasing of energy that you've already described, that becomes a process of actually removing that backlog and clearing out the system. And ideally, that should also be coupled with ongoing self-analysis and awareness, meaning that we need to catch ourselves like, you know what? There's that egoic pattern of mine. I was just about to shut myself down. I was just about to criticize myself for not being good enough. I was just to tell myself what I'm supposed to do, which it wasn't what I felt like I wanted to do. So we have to become aware of these patterns And so that we're not just taking all this stuff that we've released and then like, oh shit, I've got to go stuff it all back in again because now I'm uncomfortable. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. So it's part of a process. So one of the things that I like to emphasize is that I'm not interested in one-off experiences. You know, sometimes people approach psychedelics and are like, oh, I'm looking for a big insight. Like, give me some big insights, or I want some downloads. I want information. And for me, that's the ego that's looking for stuff. And that's kind of the one-off approach. But this idea of, look, I probably have a backlog of unreleased energies, and that I'm probably actually rather contorted within my being because I get these knots of energy within myself that create my anxiety, my fear, you know, whatever it is. And that it's going to take a while to actually unravel that, then to release it, and then to become aware of, okay, this is the pattern that created that in the first place. So how do I avoid recreating that now and take full responsibility for myself? So in that sense, it's a form of therapy that you are looking to unwind these places, release the backlog, and then start learning how to operate from a place of energetic authenticity so that you don't recreate those conditions for yourself. And so that is a process of what I like to call self-liberation. And that's another big one that sometimes we go like, oh, I just want to get the teachings from this guru, or I want to sit with this shaman, or I want to go to this workshop, or I need to read this book. And we're always looking for somebody to feed us the answers and to give us purpose, give us meaning, give us something to do. And this is about self-liberation. That's really this idea that only you have the ability to liberate yourself. Nobody else can do it for you. And even the liberation is a little bit of an illusion because you already are this universal consciousness and being. It's actually just learning how to trust and let go so that you can just allow yourself to be that all forms of trying are instituted through the ego. It's the ego that tries. And what you learn is that, oh, I just need to let myself be myself. I need to let myself be my authentic energy, and that I've been trying to be nice. I've been trying to be cool. I've been trying to be popular. I've been trying to be successful. I've been trying to be influential. I've been trying. And it's exhausting. We invest way too much energy in trying and not enough energy into just being, because being is effortless. It's going to happen whether you try it or not. And that's where it's just this sense of, you know, going back to kind of that question that I asked, like, and again, the sort of what's the point? It's like I like to say, look, when you get to your deathbed and when you know, like, shit, I think it's time, would you like to look back on your life and say, well, it might not have been everything that I wanted it to be, and I might not have achieved everything that I wanted to achieve, but at least I was myself all the way through, and I can live at peace in my heart knowing that I didn't miss out on being myself. But if we get to our deathbed and it's like, fuck, I've spent my entire life trying to be something for this idea that I had that was the ideal, and I was never happy, never fulfilled, never satisfied. And whose fault is that? Fuck, it was my fault? What? You know, I'd rather be at that point where you're giving up the ghost and saying, you know what? I've done my best at being myself, and that's really all I could do. So, cool. Time's up. Time to go.
It's funny, man. There's a few things there I want to say. One thing is that they've done studies. I don't know how comprehensive they are. I'm not a scientist, but there's a study or a news article out there where some lady went and asked people what was the biggest regret in their life, top 5 regrets. I can't remember them all, but one of them was, I wish I was more true to myself. It wasn't, I wish I spent more time at work. I wish I made more money. I wish I had more boats or whatever. Yeah. One of the top regrets was, I wish I was true to myself. The other thing, before I forget, is, I'm living in Peru at the moment, so I'm working fairly frequently, probably compared to most people, with plant medicine, ayahuasca and huachuma as well. And the thing that I keep learning, I'll learn it and then I'll forget about it. Then I learn it and I forget about it, is basically what you said, where it's like all my ideas about everything are just getting in the way of everything. And especially, it's so clear to me on the plant. So I'll have an idea about, I've got this issue and it's because of this happened, and now it's set up this dynamic in myself. Like, I've read books about trauma and psychology. Like, I think I get what's really going on. And I just keep learning that every time I do that, every time I try and put a box around my experience and think I know what's really going on, it blocks the magic of these beautiful medicines, plant medicine. Yeah. And when I can just sit back and let go of the mind, let go of my ideas, and just feel, and it's not comfortable sometimes because it's like hitting stuff in the body that's like, oh shit, that really hurts. And it's really it's like you said in your mushroom video, it's learning to relax around these spots of tension so then the energy can start to flow. But it's very much a process. I've been doing this for a while, not as long as you by the sound of it, but it just takes time. And it's really, sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's incredible. It's the best journey I've ever been on. Sometimes it absolutely sucks, but you do it. Well, I do it anyway.
Yeah. So here is where, again, 5-MeO-DMT is really unique, because this kind of goes back to your earlier question in terms of like, what does it look like and what's the point? How do you help this land within yourself? So again, in most psychedelic experiences, we're still grappling with the ego, and we're experiencing, okay, yeah, there's the ego in the way. There's the ego trying. There's the ego thinking about things. There's the ego wanting to have a plan, wanting to have a solution. There's the ego wanting to avoid. Oh, there's discomfort. I want to squirm. And, let's just call it out that it's hard for the ego to get out of the way, because it's kind of its perpetual business is to get in the way. So just getting it to drop and fall away is very, very difficult. And this is why a lot of people turn to meditation, because meditation is a way of at least quieting the mind. But even there, we have somewhat of a misidentification that the ego is the mind, when the ego is not the mind, that the ego is in the body. It's actually how we are identifying with our expressions within the body. But anyway, so with 5-MeO-DMT, what can happen is that if the ego does fully get all the way out of the way, suddenly the body starts to respond and to release and process energy in a way that is completely free and unencumbered. So for example, someone thinks, oh my God, I'm dying. Now at that point, the ego can say, oh shit, no, I'm scared. And it can clamp on and have a very difficult experience. Or the ego can say, I'm dying. Okay, cool. This is awesome. And it gets out of the way. So then if somebody has a lot of repressed trauma, at that point, it will spontaneously come up and out of them. So they just might start screaming bloody murder. They might start crying. They might start throwing up all over the place. And even a really common one on 5-MeO-DMT is for people to throw up and then put it in their hands and like smear it all over their bodies, where they're kind of reveling in this state of ecstatic release of all this negative energy that they've been storing, and self-loathing and self-hatred and criticism that they're letting it out. And they're just in this state of unconditional love where they don't care. Like, I'll just rub it all over myself because I'm just ecstatic that I'm in this state. And so there's this profound cleaning out of these stored energies, and it's not processed through the ego. It's not processed through the mind. It's something that the body just does all on its own. And this is really one of the great gifts of 5-MeO-DMT, that because it can energetically override the ego, it allows for this processing and releasing of energy to take place at a very spontaneous and fully authentic level. And then about halfway through the experience, you start to feel the first layers of egoic identity come back. And that's a place where then people can start to consciously observe, oh, there's my identification. There's what I think I should do. So for example, if someone just smeared vomit all over themselves, the ego comes back and the ego says, oh my God, this is disgusting. I can't believe I just did this in front of these people. I'm so embarrassed. And then the person can say, yeah, but actually it's all okay. You don't need to be embarrassed. This is quite beautiful. You can allow yourself to be this. You can allow yourself to have this experience. So that's where, as the ego comes back, people get the opportunity to really see this is what I've been telling myself to be. This is how I've been limiting myself. Look at all this crap I had stored up in me and I didn't even know it was there. And that's another thing. It's usually surprising that, you can take people who are like, oh, I'm totally well adjusted. I don't have any traumas to release. I don't have any backlog of energy. I'm totally myself, right? And then all this shit comes out and it's like, well, no, I don't think you were you? So it operates on a level that we don't see with other psychedelic medicines. And then if you can couple your work with 5-MeO-DMT with these other more dualistically interactive medicines, then it takes these other ones to new levels. So, honestly, a lot of people who've been in the ayahuasca scene, when they get to 5-MeO, a lot of them are like, I don't know why I'd ever drink ayahuasca again, because 5-MeO-DMT is like so much more profound and effective. But for those who do, that it changes your relationship, that you start to understand the experience and the process quite differently. So it can be very effective. And I generally do recommend that people who are undergoing, again, I call this energetic reformatting and recalibration. If you're interested in doing that, actually working with a variety of different entheogens is quite valuable because each one presents a different spectrum of energy. If we kind of look at the electromagnetic spectrum, that we've got infrared, we've got ultraviolet, we've got the visible light spectrum, and each psychedelic medicine kind of gives you a different band within that spectrum. The thing about 5-MeO is the entire spectrum. It's the whole thing. But others are more limited. So ayahuasca gives you this range. Mushrooms gives you this range. Salvia divinorum gives you this really weird, freaky range over here in these subterranean energies. But working with different entheogens are different energetic tools, and you can essentially learn how to vibe into them and synchronize and resonate with that energy so that you take on these different energetic formations as you move through that process. And it allows accessing, like MDMA. It's really good for if you're like closed off in your heart. MDMA is really good because it opens that shit up. If you are dealing with a lot of tension and anxiety, things like mushrooms and ayahuasca work really well because they're working down in your gut. And that's where we tend to hold on to tension and anxiety, is more down in the abdomen. There's just lots of different ways that applies, but it's about getting into our energy and allowing ourselves to express and release. And then find, how do I bring that same level of freedom to when somebody asks me, like, how are you doing today? Do I just give them the canned answer of, oh, I'm doing great? Or is, actually, I'm having a pretty profound day today. I just had some deep insights into the nature of being. Or it could be, actually, I'm having a horrible day. I just got diagnosed with cancer and I'm feeling a little bit depressed about it, but, I'm managing the best I can. It's just this level of honesty of actually just speaking from where we truly are at in any given moment and allowing our voice, allowing our tone, allowing the energy behind the words to consistently match. Like if you ask somebody, how are you doing today? And they're like, oh, well, I'm just really having a terrible day, but man, it's great. He's like, whoa, the energy behind your words there is really fucked up. That there's no consistency there between the energy and what you just spoke and the words that you said and the ideas that you're trying to communicate to me. And so I'm just looking for, can we just get that consistency that I am always speaking from that place of authenticity? And then my voice will modulate according to what I'm actually thinking and feeling and allowing that to come through.
Mm-hmm. I love this, man. It seems like, once upon a time, I would be journaling and meditating and doing all this stuff, trying to fiddle with the mind. And if I could just figure out the mind, then it would all click in. And, and over time, working with these plants and some of the nervous system stuff, it's become clear to me, at least, that it's all about the energy, or whether we say energy, survival, stress, trauma, just this stuff that hides in the body. And my experience now with it is that the mind, all these thoughts, they're just leaves on a tree. They're either that or built, you pick your metaphor, out of all this stuff we carry in the body. If we can clear it in the body, and often we can clear it from the body, whether it's a 5-MeO or different practices, without it even having to think about it. We don't even need to know where it's from, what happened, what it's all about. We don't even need to have a memory about it. It can just come up and out and it's gone. It's beautiful. Like to me, it's been such a weight off because it's like, oh, I don't need to understand everything. I don't need to have a story or a narrative for everything I'm feeling. I can just feel it and then it's gone. Feel it and then it goes. It's really simple.
Yeah.
Not easy.
Yeah, it is. It's too simple. The ego reacts to it. So, I spent 7 years facilitating 5-MeO DMT experiences with clients. And, all these massive energies would arise within these events, and there'd be all these things releasing and all these things transforming. And, I'd be working with clients and different energies would be moving through me and all of this stuff. And afterwards, it was really common for people to say, well, what was that big energy that jumped out at me? Where did that come from? And they don't really know. And, also, people would ask me, like, okay, well, what did you see? What's your interpretation? And I would always just tell them, look, it's just energy, okay? It's just energy. You don't need to know. That if you really need to know, you'll know. But otherwise, it's just suppressed energy that hasn't been released. And I would use this kind of crass metaphor. I'd say, look, let's imagine that your toilet is clogged, okay? What's your number one priority? You probably want your toilet to flush. You want the thing to work correctly, right? So that's what we're doing here. Is we're getting your system to work properly. But if you want, we could sit around and we can look in the bowl. It's like, wow, what did that person eat? Did they have enough fiber in their diet? What's going on there? Who clogged this thing up and why did they do it? It's like, do you want to obsess over the shit in the bowl, or do you want the thing to work properly? So that's where I'm at on it. It's like, look, it's all energy. Your job is to ride with it. And then we have to keep in mind, all of our thoughts are energies. Literally, they're brain waves happening and electrical firings of our neurons in our head. All of our emotions are energies that arise up within our being from our heart that we can feel. And then everything we've ever sensed is energy. Light is just energy. Sound is energy. Tactile sensation is just nice, solid, rough, smooth, cold, slick, hot energy, right? Energy is all around us. We are energy. Everything is energy in one form or another. And our job as a vehicle of the one universal consciousness is just to be in sync with what is and allow, and all these energies arise up. And it's our job to embody them and express them, and then they release and let go, and then we move on. And that's every moment. The most succinct definition of energy is the potential for change. So as I'm speaking, I am changing the sound waves. So that's energy. I see things because the light waves are vibrating and changing, and I can say, oh, different colors. Look at that, right? So energy is just change. So it's finding that way into being in a state of essentially continual flow, of not getting in our own way, not putting up barriers and restrictions, so that we can energetically be in the flow of what is and be present with it, whether we're having a conversation, watching TV, deep in a psychedelic experience, or dying, or whatever it is that we're doing. Just to be present with the energy of what is and allow it to the best of our ability. And the more we can do that, the more we feel centered, at peace, present, and authentic within our lives. And so again, that's the gift that we can give ourselves, and only we can give it to ourselves. It's not about believing the right things. It's not about being the right kind of person. It's not about adopting the right identity. All of that is just the ego. It's just about allowing yourself to be as you are, naturally, uncontrived, without restrictions. So it's simple. It's tricky to actually get there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's funny, the thing I think of there is so often I've made this mistake before. I think, oh, when I've cleared all this stuff, cleared all this energy, then I can be where you're talking about. But there's an element of that, I suppose, at play. Like as we clear more, we do, there's more peace, there's more happiness, there's more joy. But it starts right now, where it's like learning to be like whatever you're feeling right now, whatever we're all feeling, it's learning to be with that tension, pain. Yeah. That starts there. It's not about like waiting, going, okay, I'll be happy and peaceful once I've cleared all that with 5-MeO and meditation and ayahuasca. It's going, no, learning to hold that space for yourself right now with whatever's going on for you.
Yeah. It's not an end goal achievement. It is about how to reorient to being right here, right now. and really allowing that. And, this is the thing, is that also sometimes people get a really sort of idealized version of what they think this is. And they think like, oh, if I could do that, if I could liberate myself, I'm just going to be happy and ecstatic all the time. Reality is I'm going to be, gifted with reality, giving me everything I need because I'll just be in this perfect state of synchronization. And that's all just projections of the ego, because guess what? Shit's going to happen. Stuff's going to go wrong. Stuff's going to be uncomfortable. And you are eventually going to fall apart, disintegrate, and die. You're all going to die eventually. And there's going to be a lot of shit in between now and then when that happens. And so it's not about achieving some idealized state. And it's not about avoiding what is uncomfortable or thinking that, if I just get in alignment, it's just so endemic in spiritual circles that I'm going to be healthy all the time and I'm going to have all the money that I need all the time because I'm actually just creating my reality. So I'm going to manifest everything for myself perfectly. If there's one word that encapsulates the modern spiritual egoic attachment, it's manifesting, this idea that I'm just manifesting my reality and I'm going to give myself all the good things all the time. It's like that is such an overstatement of the ego. It just really, it rubs me the wrong way. I don't like idealized states because everything changes. It changes. That's the thing, is it's changing all the time. There is no idealized state, but you can still relax and be yourself. That's not a permanent state. It's a permanent changing, really.
On that note, if someone is listening to this and wants to do this kind of a thing, of course, if they have access to 5-MeO or ayahuasca or huachuma, people can come to Peru, of course. How do you, let's say they don't have access to psychedelics, or they're not in a position where they don't feel ready to say do it. They don't want to do that yet because for whatever reason. What tools or what things could you recommend for someone to get into this kind of a feeling energy and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. There's a variety of different ways that I like to recommend. So we can start with some of the most basic. One is start being honest. And it seems easy. It's not, because there's probably a lot of things that are convincing you in your life to not be honest. And so when I say be honest, that I tell people, be honest with yourself internally and externally, meaning don't bullshit yourself. And that's a hard one because a lot of people have a lot of beliefs and a lot of ideas and a lot of desires. To really be honest means don't accept anything as true that you don't know with absolute certainty as being true. And you know what? That includes like most things. So that's a big one. Like if people say, well, I believe in God, or I believe in an afterlife, or I believe in divine spirits. It's like, well, do you know that for certain? Do you know any of that is real? You have to be honest with yourself. Or if you're committed to a political ideology, that you're going to have certain values, like I believe the free market is best. Why? Whatever it is. So start to be honest with yourself. And also, notice when you are critiquing and judging yourself, when you are telling yourself that you need to be a certain way or say a certain thing, and start to pay attention to how you're vocalizing. Does my tone of voice actually match what it is that I'm trying to say? What patterns do I have? Like, for example, I know some people who giggle all the time, and they might say something like, oh, I'm having a really hard day today. Ha ha ha. Like, whoa. What is that energy? Like, how does that fit with what you just told me? Or people who are overly happy all the time. Like, oh, I'm just having the best day. It's so great to see you. It's so beautiful. It's like, okay, I think you're overplaying it. And the same with people who are just like, it's all hopeless. It's all to terror and destruction. It's like through the ego, we indulge in these patterns. We indulge in these things. So it's just an invitation to start paying attention to yourself. And like, am I really just being honest? Am I expressing what I really think, what I really feel? Am I trying to tell people what I think they want to hear? Am I trying to be a certain way in order to please my idealized version of my parents or of God or of society? Or am I allowing myself to be myself? And so you just start to ask yourself these questions. And then I like to tell people, just try it with the simple things. Like somebody asks you like, hey, do you want a glass of water? And, you might say, oh, just to be polite. Oh yeah, great. I'd love some water, but maybe I'm not actually thirsty right now. So practice with the little things. Try saying, you know what? I'm good right now, but if I get thirsty, I'll ask you when I'm ready, Or if somebody invites you over for dinner and you think, shit, well, it's been 2 weeks since I've gone over to mom's and, I really owe her a meal. But if you don't feel like it's like, you know what, Mom, I really appreciate that you invited me over for dinner, but I'm kind of feeling like doing something else tonight. So I'll let you know another time when I feel like we can connect, just so starting to kind of stand up for yourself and actually pay attention to where am I really? Am I a people pleaser? Am I a habitual naysayer? Am I a grumpy fuck? Whatever it may be. You start to pay attention and you start to be honest. And that gives you more self-awareness and more freedom. So that's a real basic one that people can do, but it's tricky because there's a lot of pressures to perform in certain ways. And then you can start to ask yourself, have I created conditions in my life that make it difficult for me to really be honest with myself? So for example, I don't want to urge anyone to just immediately quit their job or anything, but maybe you're working a job where you feel like you're really just not being authentically yourself and not being really in tune with yourself. So it might mean making some big life changes. Like for me, I did want to leave my wife. I waited for years hoping that something would happen so that I didn't have to do the hard work of making the choice. But when it came down to it, it's like, look, I'm not happy in this relationship. I haven't been happy in this relationship for a long time. Nobody else is going to change it. I have to change it. So sometimes you do have to take big steps in order to be honest with yourself. Okay. Now, another one is looking at where do you put your allegiance. So this gets back into the question of meta egos, right? That you can start to ask like, well, why do I always dress this way? Is because I want to be part of this particular group, or that why do I profess these political ideologies? Do I want to be part of this group? Like, what does that mean? What meta egos am I attached to? It's one thing to say, for example, yeah, I live in the United States, so I'm an American. But it's really different to say, yeah, America's number one. We're totally exceptional. We're the best in the fucking world, man. America number one. There, I'm really investing my identity into this meta ego, this idealized state. So you can start to examine that in your life. Like, where am I attaching my ego? And is that really me? And is it really even real? For people to say, yeah, America's number one. Well, we've got some of the worst healthcare in the world. We've got terrible education. We have just this totally dysfunctional political system. We're built on slavery and genocide. What makes us the best? I mean, where does that even come from? We are the best. We're number one. So you can start to examine that. Now, here's where it gets into something that is really quite interesting. And this is asymmetry versus symmetry. So all of these things that I'm describing with the ego, notice that it's all based on asymmetries, that the ego says, I like this, I don't like that. I want this, I don't want that. I'm going to allow myself to be this way. I'm not going to allow myself to be that way. I'm going to believe these things. I'm not going to believe those things. So we create all these internal asymmetries. So we become more one-sided, essentially. And also, I just invite anyone just to pay attention to this. Just notice that almost everything that you do interacting through subject-object duality between yourself and the world is accomplished through asymmetries. This is very natural. So, for example, if I want to drink a water right now, I reach out with my right hand because my water is to my right, and I take it and I drink it. And then I put it down. Look at that. And so there's a physical asymmetry there. And there might also be an internal asymmetry where it's like, okay, I have prayed to this water and I've invested it with all of this good juju. And in drinking this, I am bringing myself to my highest state of awareness. So I could also project all of these ideas onto reality, but it's an asymmetry because it's one kind of projection versus not another kind of projection. And then also if I want to write something, I write left-handed, so I have to grab my pen with my left hand. And so here's subject-object relationship. So everything that I'm engaging in reality is accomplished through these physical asymmetries in my being. Now, one of the things that I learned early on is first I experienced this in myself, and then I started paying attention to how this was showing up in other people's experiences, is that when I went beyond my ego in my 5-MeO DMT experience, my body naturally and spontaneously exhibited mirrored bilateral symmetry. So my body would just move. And Martin was not controlling those movements. These movements were just happening. And I thought about it. It's like, well, what happens when somebody wins a race? When somebody wins a race, they go, yeah. They open up in this nice star position where there's this nice symmetry. They're not relating to subject and object. What they're doing is they're expressing a feeling that is exploding out of them. So this energy is opening up from this center place. So this is one of the basic guidelines that I use. I tell people, start paying attention to your own asymmetries, your internal asymmetries and your external asymmetries, because that will show you how your ego is interacting with yourself and with the world. And then I also recommend, so start actually spending some time embodying yourself with bilateral symmetry. And that when you do this, because the ego functions through energetic asymmetries, it actually makes it harder for the ego to engage because it can't rely on its normal asymmetrical patterning. So, for example, if you're in a difficult situation, you're feeling really stressed by something, what I tell people is go into a state of symmetry. I call this a neutral position where the left and right sides of your body are relaxed, open, and mirroring each other. And then notice as you think about your problem, you probably want to, you might want to squirm or you might want to fidget. And so you can start to see, oh, look how these asymmetries are playing themselves out through my being. Or you might want to turn away from what's bothering you. Like oftentimes if people are uncomfortable, they'll present sort of one shoulder to you because they feel like, oh, I've got to protect myself. And so they go into an asymmetrical posture. So when you're uncomfortable, actually try just facing things head on like that. And then also kind of feeling into how do I face reality head on in this way? Knowing that if I'm facing it, my vulnerability is exposed. So it's kind of going into this idea of, can I allow myself to be vulnerable? Can I also find strength in being vulnerable? Can I engage from this place of symmetry rather than falling into the asymmetrical patterns? And then the more you do this, the more you find that actually my asymmetries are operating unconsciously within me. I didn't even know I was doing it. But now that I'm becoming aware, now I can choose. Do I go into asymmetry because I'm choosing it or because I was driven to it by the habitual patterns of my ego? So those are the basics. And then if you take those into your work with psychedelics, where we're going into an amplified energetic experience, that's how you apply all of this and start to pay attention to what's really going on within you to find where is my authentic expression of energy. So those are the basics.
Fantastic. I think that's a good note to end on. So I can keep talking to you all day, man. I just so much other things I want to ask you about. But yeah, if people want to learn more about you or the podcast or get in touch with you, where is the best place for them to do that? Places.
Yeah. So my main hub would just be martinball.net. And from there, the get links to my books, my art, my music, my podcast, my YouTube page, my integration work, all of that. And so the podcast is the Entheogenic Evolution. New episodes come out every week. On Amazon, is my Amazon author page, Martin W. Ball. I use the W there. For anybody who's interested in having a conversation, either preparing for a psychedelic event or looking at integrating or also facilitating and serving others, I do offer 30, 60, and 90-minute video calls. And for that, my webpage is non-dual-entheogenicintegration.com. And yeah, you can find my books wherever you find books online, and you can find my music, which is, I don't use the W with music, so it's just Martin Ball. You can find that, YouTube, Amazon, Apple Music, all that crap, Spotify. So it's out there. So I'm easy to find. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not associated with any groups or organizations. I'm very much an independent actor in this field. So yeah, just come to my webpage and find me there, and always happy to connect and talk with people.
Fantastic. I will put those links to all of that and any of the books that we mentioned, all that'll be in the show notes at rageheart.co. Martin, thanks for coming on the show, man.
All right. Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it.
I have a question for you. Do you feel locked out of life? I remember when I used to feel like this. Life itself was fine in a lot of ways, but internally, I'm like, is this it? Like, really, is this it? Is this as good as life's getting? Is this as good as I'm going to feel? Even worse was the fact that I'd felt that way for so long that it was, well, normal, for me at least. I didn't know anything else. I had no reference point outside my personal experience. Looking back, it was like being locked out of life, locked out of all the cool shit, the good things that people talk about, purpose, joy, meaning, passion, satisfaction, and contentment. Just feeling like, I'm good, I'm happy. Waking up consistently every day with gratitude, peace, and genuine excitement for life, to be alive on this beautiful planet. Put another way, I'm talking about life lived in full, blazing, ultra-high definition color, not the black, white, and gray that I spent decades in. To be specific, I would say that means feeling love on a daily basis, whether from your lover, your family, your pets, or even from the majestic natural world that's all around us. Feeling so connected to your purpose that you're willing to do just about anything to see it through. And tapping into a deep sense of purpose, it's the real secret to success. All these hacks, you don't need that stuff. You just got to figure out and start to feel what you're here to do. Right? I'm talking about feeling so relaxed in your body, actually feeling that you actually feel it, right? Not just in your mind. In other words, a quiet mind with no thoughts, it's not enough. That's just the mental aspect of relaxation. The real test is, do you feel it in your body? Because relaxation, it's a feeling, right? It's a bundle of sensations. It's something that we experience. It's not something that we think. And it's not simply an absence of thinking. Think about it, right? If your mind is quiet, but your body is all tense and tight, is it really accurate or true to call that relaxed? Hell no. The same test applies to love and purpose and pretty much everything else. It's one thing to think about your purpose, to journal and theorize and think it through, to read books, self-help books about it, get someone else's ideas on what your purpose should be. It's quite another thing to feel your gut and your heart, in other words, your body, literally pulling you towards something. It's not a mental thing. It's physical. Like that song, let's get physical, or however it goes, baby. The same with love. It's one thing to say, I love you. It's another thing to feel a love so deep and profound that tears come to your eyes and you are rendered speechless with gratitude. Now, here's the crazy thing. I'm not talking about some rare, crazy thing. I'm talking about healthy human functioning, a healthy nervous system. These things do not need to be rare, hard-to-find items in your journey through life. They can be your daily companion. The trick is getting to the root problem If you feel like you're locked out of life, as I've described above, with a lack of feeling love, joy, purpose, and real relaxation, it's likely your nervous system is simply stuck in freeze mode. In other words, due to a buildup of survival stress in your nervous system from the life you've lived so far, your nervous system has decided to shut down all feeling because it's too painful or uncomfortable or impossible to feel. That's the problem. The solution is to reestablish your ability to feel again. Learning to feel will gradually defrost the freeze mode of the nervous system. This means feeling what's waiting to be felt. And often, that's a lot of pain and disappointment and fear and frustration and terror and rage, as well as a lot of surprising and strange and even weird physical sensations in your body. But if you're willing to feel all of that, you'll discover your ability to feel love, joy, purpose, meaning, and true relaxation grows simultaneously. That's really the purpose of Rage Heart. This podcast, the Daily Growl, the email list I do, the Rage Heart Academy, everything I'm doing with Rage Heart is about this, teaching people to feel again. And this is really the same thing as Martin and I talked about today on the podcast. Knowing who you are is not a thinking thing. It's not about having the correct idea about what or who you are. It's about feeling it, a connection to the direct experience of what you are. So that's Rage Heart. Learning to feel again, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Over time, the bad and the ugly tends to dissolve and leave as we feel it, while the good grows and grows and grows. If you're interested in that, even if it means feeling some uncomfortable stuff along the way, come join me inside Rage Heart, inside the Daily Growl, my free daily email newsletter where I talk more about this. And that's really what I've just been reading out here is an email that I sent out today to the Rage Heart, to the Daily Growl list. So if you'd like to get more emails or things like this, sign up for the Daily Growl at rageheart.co. That's like Braveheart, but rage, just like the podcast name. Rageheart.co, and a little box on the homepage there. Put your email address in, hit the give it to me baby button, and confirm your email address, and then you'll be in. One more thing before I go. Some people, usually dudes, think feeling is just for weak people. But what's true weakness? Avoiding feeling because it makes you uncomfortable? Like a lot of dudes and probably a certain amount of women too. Or bravely choosing to feel what's inside of you, even though it makes you uncomfortable. Man or woman up, learn to feel again and remember who you are.